The night the F4 tornado tore through Calloway County, 37 people huddled in darkness 20 feet beneath Sarah Vance's wheat field, listening to the roar above them fade into silence. They pressed against cool earthen walls reinforced with timber, breathing recycled air through ventilation shafts cleverly disguised as irrigation pipes, while above ground the town they'd built their lives around ceased to exist. And every single one of them. The mayor who'd denied her building permits, the neighbors who'd called the county on her for suspicious excavation, the church ladies who'd whispered she was preparing for some kind of cult compound, knew they owed their lives to the woman they'd spent 2 years mocking. But that vindication came later. The story began on an August morning 2 years earlier, when Sarah Vance stood in the Calloway County clerk's office requesting permits to dig on her own property. "How deep exactly?" the clerk asked, not looking up from her computer. "Approximately 25 feet across 3 acres, Sarah replied evenly. The clerk's hands stopped moving. She looked up. "Ma'am, what are you building?" "Storm shelters. Connected. With proper ventilation, water storage, and emergency provisions." Within an hour, word had spread through town. By that afternoon, Sarah's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Her sister called first. "Sarah, people are saying you're digging some kind of compound out there. This looks crazy." Sarah stood in her kitchen, watching through the window as a truck slowed on the road, the driver openly staring at the surveying stakes she'd placed across her back 40. "Remember the Moore tornado? The Joplin one? How many people died in their basements because basements don't help against EF4 or EF5 winds? That's Oklahoma. That's Tornado Alley. This is Kansas. Kansas gets tornadoes, Michelle. Bad ones. And this county doesn't have a single public shelter that meets FEMA standards for violent tornadoes." I checked. "So you're going to dig what tunnels?" "A network. With multiple entry points. Reinforced. Deep enough that wind speed doesn't matter." Her sister's silence spoke volumes. Finally, "Sarah, you're going to look paranoid." "I'm going to look prepared," Sarah corrected. But she was wrong about that. The permits came back denied. Reason given: proposed construction exceeds reasonable scope for agricultural or residential use. Sarah hired a lawyer. The county hired a better one. Meanwhile, she started digging anyway, working before dawn and after dusk with rented equipment, moving earth in careful loads she could justify as drainage work or foundation prep. That's when the real talk started. At Morrison's Feed and Supply, Bill Morrison told customers Sarah Vance had lost it after her husband died, building some kind of underground fortress like she thought the world was ending. At the Baptist church, women whispered she'd always been odd, living alone out there, no children, spending money on whatever that was, instead of normal things. The local Facebook group debated whether someone should call social services, though for what, no one could articulate. Sarah heard it all. Small towns being what they are, everything eventually circles back. She kept digging. By October, she'd excavated the first tunnel, a main corridor running 200 feet beneath the wheat field, 8 feet tall, reinforced with pressure-treated timber and steel brackets every 6 feet. She poured concrete floors, installed drainage systems, built wooden bunks along the walls. She brought in a drilling company from 2 counties over to sink a deep well with a hand pump backup. She stockpiled canned goods, batteries, medical supplies, blankets. "You're being ridiculous," her neighbor Tom Hendricks said, leaning on his fence line one evening while Sarah unloaded bottled water. "We've lived here 40 years and never needed anything like that." Sarah straightened, wiping sweat from her forehead. That's exactly how long people in Moore had lived there too. Tom shook his head. "You know what people are saying, right? That you've got some kind of doomsday mentality. He stopped. "Crazy," Sarah finished. "Let them say it. I'm just trying to help. You're making yourself a target for jokes, Sarah. The whole town thinks you've gone off the deep end." She looked at him for a long moment. "When's the last time you checked if your homeowner's insurance covers tornado damage?" He blinked. "What's that got to do? Most policies don't. Not fully. And the high school gymnasium, they call a shelter? It's not rated for anything above EF2. Neither is the courthouse basement. If a big one comes through, Tom, where exactly are you planning to go?" He had no answer. He walked back to his house, and the next week Sarah heard he'd told half the coffee shop crowd she tried to scare him into joining her bunker cult. By spring, Sarah had completed 3 separate tunnel branches, each with its own entry point disguised as equipment sheds or old root cellars. She'd installed ventilation shafts that looked like mundane farm fixtures. She'd created a system that could sustain 60 people for 2 weeks underground without resupply. And on a humid May evening, when the sky turned green and the sirens started wailing across Calloway County, that system was ready, even if no one believed they'd ever need it. The day started ordinary. Sarah spent the morning repairing fence line, the afternoon organizing supplies in the tunnels, rotating stock, checking seals, testing the hand pump. The weather felt heavy, but May in Kansas always did. She listened to the radio while she worked. Severe thunderstorm watch. Possible tornadic activity. The same warnings they'd heard dozens of times. By 4 o'clock, the light changed. Sarah knew that light. Every Plains person did. The yellow-green tent that meant the atmosphere was reorganizing itself into something dangerous. She walked to her house and turned on the television. The meteorologist's voice had shifted from cautious to urgent. "We have a confirmed tornado on the ground west of Hutchinson, moving northeast at 40 miles per hour. This is a large and extremely dangerous tornado." Sarah's farm lay directly in the potential path. She made one phone call to Michelle. "You need to get to my place. Now, bring Dave and the kids." "Sarah, we'll go to the school." "Michelle, I'm not asking. Get here now." She hung up. Then she went outside and opened all 3 entry points: the equipment shed, the old storm cellar door, the concealed hatch near the barn. She turned on the battery-powered lights below. She checked the ventilation one more time. Then she stood in her driveway and waited. Tom Hendricks was securing his patio furniture when he noticed her. He walked over, looking at the sky nervously. "You heading to the school?" "No," Sarah said. "I'm staying here. You should too." He laughed, but it sounded wrong. "In your tunnels?" "Sarah, come on. Tom, that gymnasium isn't rated for violent tornadoes. You know that. You've always known that." The siren started. Not the distant wail of a test, but the urgent, continuous scream that meant take cover immediately. The sky had turned the color of a bruise. Tom's wife came out of their house, yelling something Sarah couldn't hear over the wind. "There's room," Sarah said louder now. "Bring your family. Right now." For a moment, Tom just stared at her. Then he looked at the sky. Then he ran. Within minutes, they came. Not just Tom and his wife and their teenage son, but others. Cars turning into Sarah's driveway. People who'd laughed at her, who'd called her paranoid, who'd rolled their eyes every time her name came up. The Hendricks family, the Mormons from the church, Bill Morrison and his wife, the county clerk who'd denied her permits, a young couple with a baby Sarah had never even met. She directed them without ceremony. "Equipment shed, down the ladder. Move to the back, make room. More people coming. No, I told you so. No questions. Just direction." Michelle arrived with Dave and their 2 kids. Her face was white. "The radio says it's in EF4. "Sarah, I know. Get below. Far tunnel, left branch." The wind was screaming now. The sky had gone nearly black. And still they came. Cars abandoned in the driveway. Doors left open, people running. Sarah counted heads. 37. 37 people in her tunnels. And the tornado was 2 minutes out. She took the equipment shed entrance, pulling the heavy door closed behind her, sealing it with the iron bar she'd installed for exactly this purpose. The ladder down felt endless. At the bottom, people pressed against the walls, children crying, someone praying loudly. Sarah moved through them, checking that everyone was clear of the main junction, that the secondary exits were accessible. Then it hit. The sound was like a freight train and a jet engine and the end of the world combined. The earth itself seemed to vibrate. Dust fell from the timber supports. Someone screamed. Sarah braced herself in the main corridor, watching the supports, checking for flex, for cracks, for any sign the structure couldn't hold. It held. For 3 minutes that felt like 30, the tornado passed over them. The sound was so loud it became almost abstract, too overwhelming to process as real. Children buried their faces in their parents' shoulders. Tom Hendricks gripped his wife's hand so hard his knuckles went white. Bill Morrison, who'd called Sarah crazy to her face, sat with his back against the earthen wall and wept silently. Then, slowly, the sound changed. The roar became a rumble. The rumble became wind. The wind became silence. For a long moment, no one moved. No one spoke. Then someone whispered, "Is it over?" Sarah waited another 2 minutes, counting in her head. Then she moved toward the equipment shed exit. Stay here. I'll check. She climbed the ladder and pushed against the door. It resisted, something heavy on top. She pushed harder. The door lifted 6 inches, then 12, then enough to see out. The equipment shed was gone. Her house was gone. Tom's house was gone. The entire visible landscape had been scoured clean, reduced to foundations and splinters. The only structures still standing were the disguised entry points to the tunnels, built low and strong enough that the wind had passed over them. Sarah climbed out and looked across what used to be her farm. Where her barn had stood, there was nothing. Where the road had run, debris was piled 6 feet high. In the distance, she could see the town, or what remained of it. The water tower was twisted. The grain elevator had collapsed. The school gymnasium had lost its roof. She climbed back down. 37 faces looked at her in the lamplight. We're alive, she said simply. Everything above ground is gone. But we're alive. They stayed underground for 6 hours. Not because they had to, the storm had passed, but because there was nowhere else to go. Sarah organized it like she'd organized everything else. Calmly, methodically, she distributed water and granola bars. She set up the chemical toilet in the branch tunnel she'd designated for that purpose. She checked everyone for injuries, cuts from broken glass, a sprained ankle from someone who'd run too fast, a child with an asthma attack who needed the inhaler Sarah had stocked in her medical kit. Bill Morrison approached her while she was organizing sleeping arrangements. His voice was hoarse. Sarah, I told people you were crazy. I told them you'd lost her mind after Jack died. She looked at him. Didn't speak. I'm sorry, he said. I should have. We all should have. He couldn't finish. Sarah handed him a blanket. Help me set up bedding in the North Branch. People are going to need to sleep. By midnight, emergency services had established a temporary command post on what used to be Main Street. Sarah led her group out, using all 3 exits because debris blocked parts of the main ladder. They emerged into a changed world. National Guard trucks were already rolling in. Generators hummed. Portable lights illuminated a landscape that looked like a war zone. A Red Cross coordinator saw them coming. 37 people walking out of seemingly nowhere, and stopped mid-sentence. Where did you all come from? Underground, Sarah said. My property. Half a mile west. The coordinator stared. You have a shelter? A real shelter. I have tunnels. 20 feet down. Room for 60. Within an hour, a county emergency supervisor was standing in Sarah's main tunnel, shining a flashlight along the timber supports, the concrete floor, the ventilation shafts, the stored supplies. He turned to Sarah with an expression she couldn't quite read. How long did this take you? 2 years. And the county denied your permits. Yes. He shook his head slowly. Ma'am, you just saved 37 lives with infrastructure this county should have built decades ago. He paused. The school gymnasium was destroyed. 11 people were inside. We got them out, but he didn't finish. He didn't need to. The story spread fast. By morning, news crews from Wichita were interviewing Sarah on camera, filming the tunnel entrances, talking to the people who'd taken shelter. By afternoon, it had gone national. By evening, it had gone viral. The woman they mocked built the shelter that saved them. Tom Hendricks did an interview standing in front of where his house used to be. I told her she was paranoid, he said, voice breaking. I laughed. We all did. And she saved my family anyway. The county supervisor came back 3 days later with a formal apology and a team of engineers. They wanted to study Sarah's design. FEMA wanted specifications. Other counties wanted to build similar systems. The permits office wanted to issue retroactive approval, which Sarah declined. Bit late for that. But the real change was quieter. A week after the tornado, while Sarah was clearing debris from her property, Michelle helped her stack salvage timber. I should have listened, Michelle said. Sarah wiped her forehead. You're here now. No, I mean before. When you tried to tell us. We thought you were being paranoid, but you were just paying attention. Sarah looked at the foundation where her house had been. She'd lost everything above ground. 40 years of memories, photos, Jack's tools, her mother's dishes. But she'd saved 37 lives. That math worked. Within 6 months, Calloway County had broken ground on a public shelter system based on Sarah's design. The high school built a proper refuge area. Not a gymnasium with a hope, but a reinforced underground structure rated for EF5 winds. 3 churches pooled resources to build community shelters. The town that had mocked her started teaching her methods. Sarah rebuilt her house, smaller this time, simpler. She kept the tunnels maintained. And on quiet evenings, she'd walk her property and look at the wheat growing back in the fields above the corridors that had saved so many. Tom Hendricks stopped by one of those evenings. He'd rebuilt too. A new house, slightly west of where the old one stood. "Sarah," he said, "I wanted you to know. My son's studying emergency management at K-State now. Because of what you did. What you built." She nodded. Didn't need to say anything. "And I wanted to ask." He looked embarrassed. "If it's ever needed again. If another storm comes. Can we?" "Yes," Sarah said simply. "That's why it's there." He nodded, relief visible on his face. Then he went home. Sarah stood in the growing darkness, listening to the wind move through the wheat. Somewhere below her feet, 3 branches of reinforced tunnel waited in the silence. Ventilation shafts disguised as irrigation pipes breathed quietly. Hand pumps stood ready. Supplies sat organized on wooden shelves. Not paranoia. Not crazy. Just prepared. And when the next storm came, because in Kansas, there was always a next storm, she'd be ready. And this time, she knew she wouldn't be the only one. The tunnels beneath Sarah Vance's farm became part of Calloway County's identity. They appeared in emergency preparedness brochures. School groups toured them. Engineers studied them. And the woman who'd been mocked for 2 years became the woman who'd seen what no one else had been willing to see. That survival wasn't about luck or hope. It was about preparation, planning, and the quiet courage to be right when everyone else was wrong.